So every once in a while, we come across a project that just sort of takes us off guard and it's like, ooh, yeah, let's do that. Welcome back to the shop, guys. It's really a pleasure to have you here, and I'm excited to share with you a distraction.
Oh, wait, I want to do the distraction.
Distractions happen in the hobby. Of course, I am excited to have the pea shooter done. Yes, done-ish, as done as I'm going to do right now. More on that next week. The Hostetler Weddell Williams Model 44 Racer. Yes, that is the next big thing that's happening in the workshop, but I have this distraction. So the best I can tell is that this is a Prather Deep V 40 or 40-inch Deep V. I guess Deep V is the name of the boat. And originally this had a nitro engine in it. Let me show you what that looks like. Yeah, so this thing's kind of weird. It's got obviously a tuned pipe and extra glow plug here. KMB engine, which is kind of exciting. Got a water-cooled head, which is neat. And then this, actually, it's an exhaust port. Now, what's weird to me is that there's no throttle on the intake side. There's a needle, right? There's adjustment, but no throttle. The throttle is actually here. It's weird. It's on the exhaust. It's like it chokes it off in order to regulate the speed of the engine. So, not my thing. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it's not my thing. And I really don't have any interest in playing with this particular thing. Number one, I do have a little pond lake thing nearby that I can go drive this thing around. It's in a residential area. Not going to put nitro on that pond. Number one, people. Number two, it's also like a goose sanctuary. Like there's natural wildlife there. And so I'm going to go electric so that I can actually play with this thing. So let me move on from here. The boat came to me by way of a club member, and it came in less finished shape. I have been playing around with it, so I don't usually mess around with polyester resins. So I wanted to play around with polyester resin and fiberglass stuff to make sure that it's compatible with what I already know, which for the most part it is. Obviously, you need to scuff up the surface really quite good. I'm using 120 grit sandpaper to take out some of the stuff that's here and also reveal some of the pinholes that I need to fill. I did some pinhole filling, but it didn't work as well as I normally do with my epoxy stuff. There's still some things I have to go back and address. But yeah, that's what this is. Originally looked like the boat. And so yeah, learning curve. On top of that, I have gone in and tried to figure out, there's no instruction manual for this thing. Kind of unfortunate for that because I really am just asking around for people to help me that know what they're doing because I don't. So what I've been able to ascertain is that the epoxy that I use, which is like resin epoxy, not polyester epoxy, it does stick to this stuff, but you have to rough it up. I'm using really like 80 grit to rough up these surfaces before I try to epoxy in place. These are wood hard points that came with it so that we can put the hatch on. Okay, so we're gonna make the watertight thing watertight. I mean, the whole point here is learn. Okay, so I don't know what I'm doing. Seems weird to like just dive in, but that's how you learn. I've been asking a lot of questions, been learning about the different hydrodynamic things in terms of like what happens when you change the thrust of the propeller, right? What happens if you mount something slightly different, like the trim tabs? What's involved in a stuffing tube? Okay, so there's a lot of different parts and terminology that you have to get through. It's that learning curve, right? So with the boat aside, let me go over some of these parts that I have just so that you can see what's all involved. All right, we got a loaded up bench here. I'm just going to sort of start. Let's go left to right. So starting off with the electronics, I have purchased a 4070 kV electric motor that's specifically for this application. It's got a jacket that slides on off. There's some O-rings in here, and water runs through this to cool the motor. Pretty neat. But it's a brushless motor, standard stuff that we know and love. Speed controller, same kind of stuff that we know and love. It's an opto, so I need to provide a separate receiver battery. More on that over there. And it's all the same stuff. There's soldering involved. Now, I had to read the manual a little bit. There are two wires here. There's a wire that's separate for programming from what you connect to the receiver. And then this is an anti-spark wire for connecting. I'm not afraid of spark, so probably just gonna put a little insulation over that and call it a day. We've got our leads, and then there's these barbs sticking off because this is water cooled. So you have water that goes in, and then you loop some tubing around and loop tubing around. And there's water that flows through here that cools the ESC down because there's no air moving over it because it's not an airplane. Because that makes sense. Moving right along, we have the pickup tube. So this is like a pickup for cooling. So the angle of this brass tube, as you're driving along, it forces water up through the tube, and then it's got a bulkhead that goes through the transom. That's this bit on the boat. It goes through the transom and then cools all your bobbly bits. And then there's a water outlet. And that just sort of, I've been told by reputable sources that it doesn't matter where you really put this. You can just sort of have fun with it. All right. In addition to that, these are turning blades, or yeah. Anyway, they stick down in the water. They help you with turning. We'll get into more on that and some of the stuff that I've learned about it as we assemble the boat. But then in addition to that, we have a propeller on a shaft here that is connected to a flexible shaft here. And that runs through this. This is a brass tube, and I have to bend this. I have to bend this to the right angle because the motor is going to, I don't have the motor mount yet. It's coming in the mail, but it sits at an angle. And so the motor gets coupled with a special coupler, right, to this shaft. And so I have to bend this tube because then it's going to come out straight on the bottom of the boat. Stressful, right? So then you've got all this metal hardware. This is all really nice stainless, actually. Polished up really well. There was just a little bit of corrosion on it, but polished up nice. And there are bearings in here. There are needle bearings that this swivels on. There are needle bearings in the bottom of the boat, wherever that piece is. Where are you? Found it. Yeah, so the brass tube actually fits very snugly in that recess. And so then you can angle, this hangs off the back of the transom, and you can angle this to be level with your keel. That's this part of the boat. It runs along the bottom. Okay, so in addition to that, we have these two wood beams that need to be epoxied into position. But I don't know where I want to necessarily put these just yet because I'm waiting for the motor mount, because I think this is in the wrong fore-aft location for the length of this, given that the nitro motor is a lot longer than what would be mounted here. So I'm waiting on that. I'm waiting on that so that I can start taking measurements because it's a geometry problem, simple geometry problem. From there, okay, we have regular switch and a quick switch mount. In addition to that, so this actually came with the boat. But I had in my stash these Dubro boating accessories. They don't make these anymore, but these are push rod seals, and I can use this push rod seal on the switch mount. That's pretty clever. But I can also use the other one for the rudder control, which I've got a nice Futaba S3010 here. That should do fine. and a servo mounting bracket that I had in my stash. Which leads us to our other electronics. I've got a 5-cell nickel metal hydride pack for our receiver. Should be plenty of juice for this little boat, and a 4-channel receiver. There's a lot of parts. It's a lot of hardware, and the weight adds up too. In addition to that, I've got this rubber foam, and that's going to create a seal around the hatch. So I'll screw that on, and then I can turn the whole boat on or off. And then, yeah, I'll secure the batteries like I normally do. Velcro, easy peasy lemon squeezy. So this is going to run on 6S with capability to run on 8S. But really, I'm just getting my feet wet. And I'm going to just have fun with this. There's no real mystery to any of it. It's just learning how to assemble things in the right order. Now, some basic stuff. Obviously, you can take your servo bracket and just CA glue it to the side of the wood, one side or the other. Depends on how everything shakes out with the motor shaft, right? And then there's all sorts of different parts here. The dog engagement with the propeller. I don't even know if this is the right pitch or size propeller. It's what came with the dumb boat. It didn't even have this nut. I happen to have one of those in my spare parts bin. But yeah, it's just figuring out the geometry, because I have to drill a hole in the boat for the brass tube. The stuffing tube is what it's called. This is called the stuff because you stuff the shaft inside the tube. Now, when it comes to stuffing tubes, what I have learned, and again, this is very surface level. I'm not an expert here. There are 2 schools of thought for stuffing tubes. You can have a liner, which is like a Teflon tube, very thin wall. The idea is to help reduce friction. But you're stuffing this thing full of grease anyway. I've got a whole tube of marine grease here that I've been using for years to lubricate stuff. I try to use the marine stuff in general because it tends to not break down as quickly, even over the lithium stuff. Anyway, just my observation. Anyway, getting sidetracked. So the stuffing tube, the idea is to help reduce friction. However, because speedboats like this, you're running extreme RPM, there's still going to be a lot of heat, which can cause deformation of the plastic, essentially. So there are those who maintain that you should really, if you're going to, in a speedboat application, not run a stuffing tube and just do your regular maintenance and regularly put more grease inside. Makes sense, right? And the reason for that is because if you have a catastrophic failure of the stuffing tube, it's going to take out your flexible shaft. And like melt stuff and throw things around and can do damage that way. I see the logic of both sides. I'm going with the simplest option. I'm meticulous about maintaining my model airplanes, and I have no expectation or even concerned that I will not be maintaining this boat. It's a pretty nice hull, gotta say. Really good craftsmanship on the fiberglass. Yeah, you got a little sneak peek that, I mean, I've sort of been stashing this out of the way while I've been working on the pea shooter. But there's a whole bunch of other stainless steel hardware that I'm trying to keep separate. There's a battery box that came with it that you can use to like isolate the radio. But I mean, honestly, the 2.4 gigahertz stuff that we have today is pretty resilient. I've treated it already with some Corrosion X. I've done that as well with the servo. And all of this stuff is just, it's Legos. It's just Legos. Now keep in mind that there are Lego sets that are really complicated. I'm not trying to say that this is simple by any stretch of the imagination. And if you think that I'm not struggling with this, you're wrong. I've asked a lot of questions to several people that are very knowledgeable. And so that's why I encourage you to find those people and make new friends. You know, the thing is, I want to paint this eventually too. And so I'm at least going to put a base white, an enamel white on this boat just to start with. I really like the color that I used back on the Transavia air truck. It's called Paprika. It's kind of like a burnt orange red thing. I think it'll fit really well with this boat, not to mention it's kind of retro as well. So if I do some pinstriping and things like that, I can do that down the road. If I can just shoot some basic paint on this, get all the hardware set up, and have some fun with it at SEF, I think that's going to be a win. So that's it for today, guys. Sharing with you this distraction and why it's fun. Why learning in the hobby is fun. And I'm going to keep going on everything else in the shop. I've got my Dubro shirt on because I was at my swap meet today. So get out there, meet some new people, enjoy the hobby, and until next time, also keep working on your flying works of art.